Hello everyone, thank you for watching FP's Channel 6. I'm Sarah Mack-Young, and today we have Miss Karen Whitehead with us.
Hello.
Hello, Miss Karen, how are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Good. Miss Karen is with the Tennessee Farm Bureau Women here in Lincoln County, and you guys have a project that you've been working on this year. We brought you a few segments already this year talking about agriculture in Lincoln County and the importance of it in our community. And Miss Karen, today we've got a really interesting program, and I'll let you tell a little bit about that.
Well, first of all, I'll tell you about what the Farm Bureau Women's Group has been doing since we were here in June. We've had various donations to various locations, the Junior's House, our local animal shelter. We've donated hygiene products and children's socks to local schools to help out for children that may be in need there. We've donated to Ag in the Classroom, and we also had Ms. Faye Coble, our committee chairman, and also member Ms. Sherry Bartlett, prepared lunch for Ronald McDonald's house and carried it up one day back in August for the families that were there that day. And today our program is going to be about beekeeping and honey. Raising bees and collecting honey used to be a bigger industry or hobby in the county, but like a lot of our interests and hobbies and farm activities has kind of gone away. Most of our viewers probably remember seeing lots of beehives. Maybe their friends, neighbors, or relatives had hives, and they probably enjoyed the honey that came from those hives. So we're going to talk about that. Mr. Don Templeton of the Milana community was very well known throughout the county for his honey, and he's passed away, but he sold honey to local merchants and other merchants in the area. He did a lot in trying to keep the bee industry alive in Lincoln County. And today we have a couple of guests, Mr. Ron White of the Milana community. He's the president of the local Lincoln County Beekeepers Association. It's a new association that they've started. And we also have Mr. Ben Fisk from the Macburg community that is also a member of that, but I think he got involved in honey when he was in the 4-H. I think that's where his interest first started, involved in his 4-H. They will talk to us about bees and honey, and not only is it a natural sweetener, but it has some medicinal purposes as well, and they're going to be talking to us about that today. They'll have some very interesting information to share with us, so we're glad to have them here, and we're glad that you've allowed us to come back and do product commodity promotion for the Farm Bureau Women.
The Farm Bureau Women is a community service group.
Yes.
These ladies they meet once a month. Mm-hmm. And they do projects and things. And so, folks, if you're interested in agriculture, or you're interested in being a part of this group, how can they get involved?
They can contact our the office, the Lincoln County Farm Bureau office in Fayetteville, and talk to Miss Nancy. She can put you in touch with someone. We would love to have more people involved in the Lincoln County Farm Bureau, and especially with the women. Sometimes there's more projects than we have people, and we would love to have people come in and help with our projects and do a lot more good for the community through the Farm Bureau Women.
Agriculture is such a main part of our economy, and maybe folks don't realize that here in Lincoln County, and you just might give them the statistics real quick. This is our #1 industry.
I don't have the statistics myself. I would say you're probably looking at cotton, corn, soybeans, probably it's going to be our top 3 products. Then, of course, you have the local farmers market, vegetables and things like that. But I would say those 3 would be our top products from the county.
Also beef cattle. That's another big one in our community.
Yes, beef cattle. Dairy cattle, not so much. Dairy products, not so much, but beef cattle. So those would be probably the top producers. Mm-hmm.
But that's one of the top industry here in our community, and so you want folks to be educated about that, know what's here, yes, and know where your food comes from, know what's out there.
Yeah, and what I've been trying to do is on the committee, which I was kind of pushed into, is trying to make our viewers aware of products and commodities that they may not realize is part of our county. Of course, everybody knows the cotton, soybeans, and corn, and beef cattle, but we're looking also, we did a show on strawberries and forestry, and I wanted to bring information to them on honeys and beekeeping, and I'm hoping to do a show on goats, maybe down the road.
Absolutely. So there's a lot of great things in our community, and there's a lot of great ways for folks to get involved with agriculture and maybe see that there's things that they can do.
Yes.
Absolutely. Well, Miss Karen, we thank you for coming in, and we thank the Farm Bureau Women for their project and educating the public about agriculture.
Well, thank you. Thank you for allowing us this opportunity to bring things to our viewers. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. We're looking forward to the interview with Mr. Ben Fisk and Mr. Ron White and talking about bees and beekeeping.
It'll be an interesting one, I'm sure.
Hello everyone, and thank you for watching Fayetteville Public Utilities Channel 6. I'm Sarah Mack Young. In our studio today we have some very special guests with us, and we're going to talk about something that's really kind of cool, something neat that maybe some folks at home don't know a lot about. But before we get in, we're going to be talking about beekeeping and bees and honey. But before we get that started this morning, our program on that, I want to introduce to you Mr. Ben Fisk and Mr. Ron White into our studio today. Ben, let's start with you and tell the folks at home a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm 17 years old and I'm a senior in high school. I first got started with bees around 7 or 8 years old when I started helping my dad tend to his 2 beehives. He's had bees for the past 10 or 11 years, and he really enjoys working with them, and we really enjoy the honey that we get from them. And I've always liked helping him tend to them and extract the honey and just work with those bees. I'm also involved in scouting and 4-H. I'm on a club soccer team, and I really enjoy. I'm homeschooled. I really enjoy just helping out with community things and other things in Fayetteville.
All right, and being a part of the community. Now let's talk about you, Mr. White. Tell everybody at home a little bit about yourself.
I will. I'm slightly older than Ben. I'm not going to tell you exactly how old I am, but I've been in beekeeping now for about 4 years, a resident of Lincoln County for about 4 years now. I got into beekeeping, quite honestly, as a result of a family reunion a couple of years ago, where my uncles had kind of chastised me for not keeping bees, which my grandfather did. And, you know, it's just part of our family tradition. So I started out with a couple of hives and have gotten up to as many as 5 hives. And just really interested in being a proponent of beekeeping because it's not understood by a lot of people, and it can become very addicting as well. I've learned that.
So it's a really neat, and it's actually a pretty cool business, honestly, and something that you don't have to have a lot of land to do, and you don't have to have a lot of area to do it in. It's something that I think most folks don't realize. They don't realize that. So let's get in and talk a little bit about this. There is a specific name for a beekeeper, so I'm going to let you guys say it and tell folks at home what that is.
Ben, go ahead. I'll let you feel that one.
A beekeeper is called an apiarist, officially. And that's just someone who keeps bees. It's basically a bee farmer. They tend to the bees, make sure they stay alive, usually extracts honey. Sometimes apiarists will extract the wax from beehives as well to use for candles and other products.
All right, so that is their technical name. How many do we have in Lincoln County?
I'm not really sure number-wise how many we have in Lincoln County. I don't know if anybody does, but we have in June started a club, the Lincoln County Beekeepers Association, which I happen to be the president of. So I'm excited about that. We have about 50 people that have been coming to our meetings the third Thursday at 6:30 of each month. So we're trying to get our hands wrapped around it and see what exposure we have in Lincoln County and just try to build on that and have it snowball, if you would.
Gotcha. So it is something that's relatively new. It's a new club, but you said you meet the third Thursday of each month. Where do you meet?
We meet third Thursday of each month at 6:30 at the UT Extension office at the Ag Center, right up there by the voting area. We have that auditorium. Our meetings start at 6:30. We have a potluck every third month, and we have guest speakers occasionally. videos, and we just talk about, it's a camaraderie. Young men like Ben, who teaches beekeeping, apiary type stuff, can mentor some that are coming in and starting hives, because if you try to do it on your own, it can be a little daunting. And we'll probably talk about this a little later. These little critters are susceptible to a lot of stuff now that they used to not have to deal with. So we have that group that can help each other, especially the newer apiarists that come in.
I've got to get that word down pat.
Well, you say beekeeper too.
Beekeeper's easier.
You guys kind of talked about a little bit in your introduction about your hives, but Ben, how many hives do you have right now?
I have 2 hives currently.
Okay, and those are yours. Your dad has his separate.
Well, no, that's for our family. We
Okay.
have, and my dad and I both work on the hives together.
And Ron, how many do you have?
I currently also have 2. I've had as many as 5, but winter issues and whatnot, I've had some pretty dismal winter results, unfortunately. So I'm trying to learn and try to do better with that.
Gotcha. So let's talk about why bees are so important. They're not only just important in our county, but they're important all the way around. And they do a lot of things, and maybe people don't understand how beneficial they are. You know, a lot of people are afraid of bees. They see one and they start running, or they start swatting, or they start, trying to get rid of him. And that may not be exactly what we need to do. So which one of you can tell us a little bit about why they're so important?
I can go ahead, yeah. So bees are insanely important to the entire world. Their biggest benefit from bees is pollination. And bees, that's just because they pollinate so many different types of plants all over the world. For example, around here they pollinate cotton and alfalfa, which really those are big feeders of cows, which is a big part of our economy. They also are they are the main pollinator of almonds. For example, that's not here, but it's across the U.S., and they also pollinate blueberries, and they pollinate cotton as well, which is also here in the South.
Vegetables.
Lots
I
of
know that a lot of
vegetables.
people, a lot of your vegetables that you find, your vegetable farmers will use bees to help pollinate as well. Squash, pumpkins, things of that nature. Those are some I know that they've used in the past as pollinators, and that's something that's big for plant and fruit production. As you said, cotton. I did not know that they used it for cotton. Alfalfa is another big one. So there's a lot of things that maybe we don't realize that they do. Let's talk a little bit. We brought Ron, you brought in some of the equipment. Talk a little bit about what we see in front of us.
Well, this probably is something that people identify with beekeeping more than anything else. It's a smoker, and it's just it has a bellow in the chamber. Mine is, as you can tell, is well used, and there's a heat shield that's missing off of there. But you basically put your fuel in there and you light it. You close it, and you basically can just keep hitting the bellow and puff smoke out. And what this allows you to do, it calms the bees, if you would. If you're getting ready to work in somewhat, some hives have different personalities. Some are more aggressive, probably because of the queen's personality, that may require more smoke. And one of my hives, I don't even smoke it. I just go in there because it just doesn't seem to be a problem. And one thought on why the smoke calms the bees is they sense maybe there's a forest fire. So they go into a preservation mode. They actually start consuming a lot of honey in the hive. So they do consume honey when you do this, so you can't over-smoke them. And this here is out of a Langstroth hive, which is your more common box hives that you see. And you can see where they have drawn comb, and this came out of a hive. Actually, the bees left, and this was just a remnant of one of the hives that I had bees in. And then Ben, I'll let you talk about your honey there.
My honey, this? Yes, this is from our hive. This was extracted recently this year. This is one of our lighter jars, and that's just the color and shade of honey just depends on what different types of nectar the bees pull, what different types of flowers the bees pull nectar from. And this year we've gotten about 150 pounds of honey off of our 2 different hives. So
Now, something that I feel like we probably need to tell folks at home and they may not understand is when you see a bee, there's different kinds of bees, and you touched on the queen. So let's talk about the different kinds of bees and what they do within the hive to create just the comb like we saw and the honey. So let's talk a little bit about that.
I'll let him talk about the majority of it. The queen, that phrase, the queen bee, is a very appropriate comment because the queen is the lifeblood of the hive. She lays the eggs, she rears the brood that produces the worker bees and the drones. So the queen is very important. There's also a couple other bees in the hive that the queen, quite frankly, has to have as well. Ben?
There are 3 different types of bees. There's the queen bee, as you talked about, and then the other 2 types are the drone and the worker bee. And I have pictures that I've drawn here of the general shapes of the different bees. This middle one here is the drone, and it's the only male bee in the hive. It's fatter, it's shorter, but the thing is, it doesn't do any work. It's the males in the hive are actually really lazy, and their only purpose in life is to mate with the queen. Now, the queen, when a new queen is born, she goes on a mating flight with the drones, and they mate in midair, and the drones, after they mate, they die. And then the queen has enough, is fertilized enough to produce eggs for the rest of her entire life. The other type of bee in the hive is the worker bee. Those are the smallest types of bees, and they're the ones that you always see. You never really see the queen because she's always in the hive, and you never really see the drones because they don't do anything. The workers are the ones that do all of the work. They go out and collect nectar, they protect the hive from invaders, they produce the honey inside the hive, they tend to the queen, and they tend to the eggs inside the hive. They're smaller, like I said, and they're shorter and thinner than the other 2 types.
Gotcha. And your worker bees are probably, as you stated, they're the ones that we see more of. And something that I think maybe that's what folks don't realize. That's something cool else that you guys kind of touched on. You talked about there's fuel that you put in the smoker to help calm and that's going to kind of make the bees more calm when you're going to go work with them. What's the fuel? How do you do that?
Well, there's different ways you can do it. It's a very, very good question. I start off, I put just a small piece of cloth or canvas in there, and I light it and get it going, and I put pine straws, my favorite to use. And I put a little bit of pine straw in there, hit the bellow a few times, leave this open, put some more in there, and as the fire gets a little bit hotter, if you would, or more involved in there, you get to a point where you just put as much pine straw in there as you can, close this, and you just keep hitting the bellow to maintain. And there's a lot, I don't know, the vaping commercials and things that I've seen, it's about what the smoke that comes out of here looks like. It's a fairly good amount of smoke.
It isn't. It's usually thick.
It's very thick, and it's like a whitish color smoke, and it's a cool smoke is what you want to achieve.
And it's not anything that harms the bees. It's very natural. All natural things that help them to know to kind of calm down, and then you're able to go work.
Right.
And the bees, and I think that's so neat. Let's talk about how does the beehive work? We talked about the different bees, but how does the hive work? How does that, I guess, all fit together? Like I see this part right here, and I think that's really cool. But how do they do that?
Let's see if I have a picture here, maybe. Well, the hive is made up of boxes, and I think I have a picture.
There
yes.
you go.
All right.
If you would hold that up, thank you.
Sure.
So in this picture, you can see there's a beekeeper, and you can see there is a hive box. And the structure of a hive is there's a bottom board, which it just sits on the ground or whatever else you have the hive sitting on. Then you have a hive box with frames inside. And a complete hive has usually 3 or 4 or 2 or 3 of these hive boxes stacked up on top of each other. And in one hive box is somewhere between 8 and 10 frames, and this is a frame. So there's just a whole bunch of these frames inside that the bee, and they're spaced so that the bees can crawl inside of the different frames. They can crawl in and out and around them and get to all the different cells. These individual little holes are called cells. the bees can get in and tend to whatever's inside the cells.
That's really neat.
So-
So they're very big. So that when they call somebody a worker bee, they're really working. These guys are really,
they do.
really working. You know, something else that you touched on that I think is very interesting is you said the winter is kind of hard on them. And that's something that takes effect on them. And I know we're going to talk about that as well here in just a little bit, but I found that very interesting and a good point for folks to be aware of. And you kind of have touched on the fact that, you know, if you see a bee, let's not, don't swat it, don't hit it, just let it be and go your way. Is that what you would say too?
Yes, definitely. Just leave it alone.
Leave it alone.
They
Okay.
won't harm you. Yeah.
They're not aggressive.
No.
Okay, that's what I tell my child. So that's what I'm saying. I'm like, it won't hurt you if you don't bother
That's
it.
good information.
Absolutely. Okay, so we talked about this is all it takes to set up a beehive and get it going. And this is not very much space. So how much space do you really need, and how many can you have? And like, if somebody wanted to take this up in their backyard.
Well, you're exactly right. It doesn't take a lot of physical real estate, but if you're in a city or municipal setting, it's probably smart to check the ordinances and also talk to your neighbors and let them know that, hey, I'm thinking about keeping a hive of bees in the backyard, because they look for water. If somebody has a swimming pool and such, they will seek out water, and you may have more bees show up. But the real estate is not large. These boxes stack on top of each other. The bottom two are usually the brood boxes where the eggs are laid, and the queen tends in there. And then everything on top of that is the honey that you would essentially rob or leave some stores for them for the winter. And then it's just a matter of letting them do their thing. They will find things to pollinate, bring nectar back to the hive. So you have the hobbyist beekeepers, then you have the commercial beekeepers and such, but it's actually easy to get started in, and it's, like I say, it can become very addicting.
Now, it's is it an expensive hobby, or is it something that, you know, in terms of doing it day to day?
It's not, I wouldn't say it's a cheap habit. If you buy a package of bees, they will typically run around $120 maybe, and that comes with a couple pounds of bees, about 5,000 bees, and they actually come in a package like this. There's about 5,000 bees in this, and the queen will be in that little box suspended down there, and you put these in the hive box like that to start it out. And if you're a wood person, you can make things, craft things. You can build your own hive boxes yourself. You can even build these, but a lot of it just depends on how many hives you want to have.
Right.
You can start a hive or two for, I don't know, what would you say, Ben?
Maybe 400 or so after you, if you buy your own boxes, 400, 450, something. If you buy the two of those colonies to put in them, and then some hive boxes as well, you can.
Right. I mean, it's not cheap. You're not going to get into it $15 or $20, but the benefits, like how much honey did you have this year?
I had 150
yeah,
pounds or
so, and I just processed 3 gallons yesterday that I was behind on. And you can sell it for various prices, but you can get back the investment that you put into it.
Absolutely. It's a cool thing. And there is actually some studies out there, folks with allergies and things, that natural honey from local areas helps with that. And some folks don't realize, but you know, there are a lot of benefits from honey and a lot of things that are really good about it that maybe folks at home don't realize. So that's why I wanted to talk to them a little bit about, you know, if this was something that you wanted to do, this is something that could really be great and beneficial. But if not, these nice folks always will help you find some honey.
Sure will.
Let's talk about, you talked about you order bees. So did they come from a certain place or how does that work?
They do. If you're in a local club, such as the Lincoln County Beekeepers Association, we're happy to have you. And later on, it's typically in the spring, as the weather warms, is when you start these hives. They're mainly farmed in southern Georgia and Florida because of the weather. They can keep the bees going pretty much year round. So that's where the packages typically come from. With that causes other issues. These bees that come from southern Georgia and Florida are not as necessarily hardy for this environment. So that's one of the thoughts about the colonies dying out, is these bees that are coming from these farms in the south are not quite as hardy for this environment. So there's an initiative to swarm catch, if you would, put boxes up and try to catch swarms of bees that have survived. The ones that died out have died, but the survivors are the ones genetically that you want to try to put in these hives. So
Sure.
there's a lot of research going on with that as well.
That's very neat. Where is the best place to set up a hive and to get bees to occupy it? I mean, how do you guys get them to come and want to occupy a hive if you've built it?
Well, if you buy a package, they really don't have any choice. they're going to go where you literally shake them out into the hive. But a swarm, you can do it in, there's some essential oils and things that mimic the bee pheromone that you can put in boxes and trees. And if a colony like this gets too crowded, they will swarm. Half of the hive with the queen will leave and the other half will stay there and try to rear a queen. Those that leave are the ones you want to try to catch in the swarms.
How far do they travel? If somebody has a hive, I mean, just a guesstimate, because that would be really hard, but if you have hives and they were to do that, how far can they travel to try to find a place to go to do the swarm, I guess is what you would call that?
Well, I don't really know a specific amount of space that they travel, amount of distance that they travel, but they travel for a good place to live. They look for hollow trees or just areas where they can hole up, and at least they stop and rest at different times. And I know they just look for good areas to be. And I know if you move a hive, they'll try to find their old hive in a radius or so of 3 miles.
Wow.
So they can travel a pretty good distance.
That's
easily.
Interesting. I just wondered that out of curiosity. How far can they travel?
Well, I've been told, I don't know if it's accurate research or not, they can travel up to 10 miles to look for nectar sources and return to the hive.
So they have to be extremely smart to do that. That's really neat. How long? So you guys were talking about how much honey you've already produced. You 3 gallons, and you've done 150 this summer.
150 pounds.
Wow, that's still a lot.
Yes, that's about 11 or 12 gallons. So
that's a lot. That's a whole lot from 2 hives. That seems like a large amount. We've had a relatively good rain and it's been very warm. So how does the weather affect you guys? You talked about the winter is hard, but how about the summer?
Well, we had, you mentioned the rain this year. In the spring, we had what is beekeepers will refer to as a good nectar flow this year. The bees really, the workers were out doing what they're supposed to do. They were working themselves literally to death to bring this nectar in. And those boxes are actually very heavy when you have 8 or 10 of these frames in there. They can weigh 50, 60 pounds of honey. So if you have several boxes, 4 or 5 boxes stacked on there, and you pull honey from all those, that's where those multiple gallons of honey come from.
Wow.
So those little critters can make a lot of honey.
Because the rain and the heats really play a factor. When it's really, really rainy for the whole spring, it kind of washes away all the nectar, and it's not as good for the bees. And if it's really hot, then the flowers don't produce nectar either. So it's a good happy medium.
Gotcha.
This year was good.
This was a good year.
This was a good year.
This was a banner year,
Yes.
if you would.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. So you call it, when you go to we harvest the honey, y'all call it robbing the hive. Explain to everybody what that looks like. I know you talked about the smoke a little while, to calm the bees, but then how do you harvest the honey?
Well, this individual here is a little braver than me in the picture because he's not wearing any gloves or a jacket. But you literally go in and you pull the frames and you look to see if there's capped honey. And it's very important that the honey has white cappings on it because it means
like this.
Yes.
So we can show
I was
you
going to say
these.
like this.
And
See,
then maybe you can explain
these are
why
old.
that's so important.
So when bees make honey, they actually make it by digesting it, and then they hold it in their body for a little bit and spit it back out into the cells. What that does is it puts digestive enzymes from the bees into the honey, and it changes the form of the honey. And when they put it in the cells, they put it in there to cool and dry out. Not really cool, but the water vapor from the honey comes out. And when they put caps on the individual cells, that means that those cells have dried out enough to be ready to be, that means essentially the honey is ready.
Mm-hmm.
And so what you want is for one of these frames with, when it's been drawn out, you want all these frames to be covered in white wax.
Okay.
Like these
Like
middle
these.
ones here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I have a question. If you put them in the spring, you put the bees in the hive in the spring, how long does it take before they're ready to really start? You'll see the white caps, and you can start harvesting the honey or robbing the hive.
Right. When you start a new package, and folks will tell you not to really expect honey from that first year, because they have to literally go in and draw all of this comb for their brood boxes, and it takes a lot of their resources to do that and get the queen laying. I think the queen can lay 2,000 eggs a day.
Yeah, something like that.
And you want to they want to just mass produce worker bees.
Sure.
Not too many drones, because like Ben said, the drones only have one function,
Yeah.
Right.
And that's just to laze around after they've done their part. But the first year you probably are not going to get honey, but there are exceptions. I started a new hive this year, and because we had a great nectar flow this year, the 3 gallons I processed came from a new package of bees that I installed in the spring. And sometimes, depending on the weather and the available nectar sources, maybe not so much.
Gotcha.
So it's very environmentally controlled, just like the rest of agriculture is dependent on the weather.
Absolutely, yes, absolutely.
As we all know.
It does a lot. Let's talk about, you're talking about harvesting it, and you said this gentleman was awfully brave, in your opinion, because he has on. So most people, anything that I've seen on beekeeping, they wear the helmet, they have the face shield, but there's also, I've seen them even with pants on, jackets on, gloves on. So let's talk a little bit about some of the, all the things because you don't want to get stung. And how do you prevent that?
Well, you'll see he has on what we call a bee face, and that's where the bees are going to attack you. They're going to attack your head and your face, so that's very important. You don't want to get stung in your eyes, of course. Unfortunately, if you're going to keep bees, you're going to get stung. And I don't know if you've been stung or not, of course. Any beekeeper says they haven't is probably lying about it.
Well, they're not a beekeeper.
I know. You're going to get stung, quite frankly. But I wear a jacket, an upper part with that hooded veil included, and I wear gloves. And I wear just a pair of jeans, and that's basically it. I think the bees are able to pick up on your, if you're nervous or uncomfortable, they sense that as well. And if you're comfortable in there and calm, like this gentleman here, obviously he's very calm, and you don't see any bees all over him. So he's very experienced and very comfortable dressing like that. I still think he's kind of brave, though.
Yeah, I actually have a full suit. It's an all white. It covers legs, torso, arms, and it has a mask attached to it that I just fold over, so there's no part of me that's not covered.
No, and that's good. I mean, there's no really reason to challenge the bees to sting you, I don't think.
Absolutely, but and that was going to be my question: is are they used to you? Are they afraid of you? I mean, it's like you said. I think if you're afraid of them, you make them uncomfortable.
Right. Well, and perfect analogy.
You ever had that happen?
Where they, I've had a couple times. There was one time I went back. You don't really, once you get into a hive, you don't really want to leave and then come back, because that gets them. They're already riled up.
Yeah.
I did that once. I forgot. I needed to get an extra frame out of a box to complete a box to extract. And I went back and got it, and I actually got stung through my bee suit twice. So
yeah, they get a little violent.
Yeah.
The analogy for me is, if you were sitting at home and somebody took the roof off of your house and reached in and started moving furniture and stuff around, that's kind of how it is in a hive. You take the top off and reach and pull around in there, you might have a tendency to get riled up a little bit. So my first year I was a little over exuberant, and I went into the hives a little bit too much, probably, and now you kind of find that happy middle. But if you do it as needed, they don't get that riled up.
Now, if let's talk a little bit about, we talked about how folks can be safe when they're robbing the hive and harvesting the honey, but what if we find, maybe we start seeing a swarm of bees around our homes? What do we need to do?
They're on the Tennessee, I don't have the website memorized, but there are lists of state list of swarm catchers that you can contact and ask them to come out and remove a swarm. Typically, a swarm catcher is going to charge you to do that. I did my first one this summer on an old property in a column that was being demolished, and it was an adventure. It was quite an adventure to move these bees out of a structure where they've been there sometimes multiple years. Sure. And have very much entrenched themselves in there. Mm-hmm. But you can, if you do have, like in your eaves of your house or in various places where, like Ben mentioned, is an inviting spot for them to start a hive, you can call professionals that will come out and actually, in my case, I took a vacuum cleaner device I have made myself and just literally sucked them out of there into a box.
Okay.
And then relocated them.
Relocated them. So, Ben, what would you, I know that they're, we don't want to get rid of them. Mm-hmm. If I had a hollowed out place in my tree and I did notice that I had a lot of activity there and started seeing many, many bees, I need to call. I don't need to go take care of it myself try to, because they are very helpful to the environment and to everything that we do. So, making that phone call to someone that does keep bees and things of that nature. Where have you sent folks before?
When we get calls, we send them to the extension office, just the UT Ag, where the meetings are held for the bee club, and then they usually send out a beekeeper.
All right. So definitely get in touch with David Qualls and the folks at Lincoln County Extension, UT Extension, because they can help you with that. I always tell folks at home there are a myriad of information, and they are happy to help you any way they can. So.
Yes.
Let's talk about some things that are hazards to the bees, things that can affect or destroy colonies. What are some of the things that are really, really big right now with bees and are hazards to the bees?
Well, the pesticides comes to mind right off the bat. Roundup is sprayed so prevalently now. If you're going to use things like Roundup, do it in the evening at sunset, because the bees return to the hive in the evening, and they really don't come out until the sun coming up. If your entrance is facing the sun, that's their cue to start working. So if you do those type of activities, it's very helpful to do that. And there are several mites out there now that, due to our global shipping economy, things have come from other countries that these bees are just not, quite frankly, just not able to deal with so well. And Ben, I don't know if you want to talk about some of the, like varroa mites and such.
There are multiple. The two biggest ones that I know of are tracheal mites and varroa mites. And varroa mites are like little ticks or leeches on the bees. They get on the bees and suck basically the blood out of them. It causes the bees to get deformed. They can lose legs or wings, and they just die because they can't survive like that. Tracheal mites get in the bees' breathing system and clog it up, and they cause respiratory problems, and again cause the bees to be less effective or cause them to die.
Is there any way to treat the bees once if they get some kind of, if one of these things happens to them?
The best way to do it is through what they call hive management, or pest management. Not go out and be reactive necessarily, but try to strengthen the bees. I'm trying to follow a more of a natural, organic type regimen with essential oils, and I just treated mine for nosema, which is a condition they can get where they literally, it's a digestive issue where they get diarrhea, literally. And then the varroa mites, there's a lot of research now leading to the varroa mites that have been mentioned. They get in there and they're like little ticks, but they carry a lot of viruses. And what happens is the hive in the winter, they're all about survival in the winter. They don't go out and forage and pull nectar in because they stay in a cluster. The queen's in the middle, and they keep her at the proper temperature. And those viruses weaken them. and they end up dying. And that's where we're having colony losses in Tennessee in the neighborhood of 70%.
Wow.
And it's getting slightly better, and that's why these swarm bees are so important, because they're survivors. They have genetically able to cope with some of this stuff. So we're trying to really capture and catch these swarms and start hives off of those genetics. But that's one of the issues with the winterization colonies dying off, are things like varroa mites and tracheal mites. And there's still a lot of, it's a fairly new thing, probably in the last 30 years that we're having to deal with as apiarists.
Well, I was going to say, okay, so in the winter when it gets really, really cold, and you were talking about how they're trying to keep the queen warm, I mean, can you go and, you can't pull them inside. I don't know how you would do that, but can you put heat lamps or something on them or build something around? I mean, I don't know how you guys would keep them warm during the winter, especially when it does get very, very cold.
I don't know. Down here in Tennessee, it doesn't really get really, really cold enough to actually affect the bees just with the cold. Up north, they do things like put tarps over them, and they have shelters that they put around the hive. They don't move the hive, but they just kind of protect it, especially from snow and different things. Down here, the bees themselves are strong enough normally to protect against that cold, but it's just when things get to them. So,
I mean, they literally cluster around the queen, and they keep her warm. And the bees on the outside cycle into the inner, and the inner ones come out to the outside. They eat, and they go back in, and they do this all winter.
Oh, wow.
And they keep bees in Siberia that are able to maintain heat in those colonies in that type of climate. So they're able to deal in their own natural way with the cold. It's these mites and viruses that are weakening them, so making it extremely difficult for them to survive over the winter.
Gotcha. So you talked a little bit about a minute ago that you went out and you relocated some bees that were in an old column on a home. Can you put those in a hive? I mean, that's part of the swarm, right? I mean, we know that they're thriving and they're strong, and that's kind of, so is that what you do when you go out and catch them?
That's exactly what I did, and I was quite excited about it because this particular landowner, Mr. David Blackwelder, said that the bees had been there at least 6 years, and they had never been treated for anything. They had literally survived on their own. So I was like, that is a genetic strain of bees that we need to capture and make other hives. You can split and make other hives off of it as well. So the key is finding the queen in there and getting her out, and then getting the bees, and then literally relocating them to another hive. If you can't find the queen, and the queens are a little difficult to see sometimes, especially when you have a mass of bees, is putting the lion's share of the bees in a hive and introducing a new queen in there. Those swarms are very important, like in the house. You literally I want to start hives from that.
Gotcha.
Most definitely.
Very cool. So let's talk about, we talked a little bit about the honey, and you guys talked about the different colors and why they would look differently, because it's the nectar of what they're eating or they're bringing back to the queen and they're producing themselves. But let's talk a little bit about, some have the combs, some don't have the combs. You know, what are the benefits, I guess, and explaining that to folks when they buy it from their farmers market or local places or at the supermarket? Why is that important?
Why is it important to...
If there's a comb or there's not a comb in there, or...
It's, for me, in my mind, what I know of, it's just, that's more personal preference, whether you want that comb in it. But there's also medicinal qualities. So if you buy it locally and it's not been processed or anything like that, then it's retained a lot more of its medicinal value. It helps with allergies, and the good thing about honey that's grown locally, especially for people with allergies, is, you know, that honey contains traces of the nectar from the plants around you that you're getting allergies from. So it's almost like a vaccine against those plants. Then honey in itself also has, because of just its makeup, it has qualities that can help your skin. It can help internally with coughs. It has antibacterial properties, so honey is just a really good substance. And generally, the darker it is, the more of those good enzymes and things it has in it to help you.
Okay, so, oops, sorry.
So
That's okay.
So that one's light.
This one's fairly light. It can get a lot lighter than that.
Okay.
But it can also get a lot darker. And that just depends on the area of the country and what type of plants that you find in that area of the country that bees are getting.
But definitely look for it locally for the medicinal purposes on it, because this is not, there's not anything it hasn't had anything added, nothing taken out. This is pure honey.
That's exactly right. It's raw, pure honey from this area. And they've actually, they found honey in the Egyptian pyramids, and it's still good.
Still good.
It doesn't go bad. It does not go bad. If it ever crystallizes, you just reheat it, stir it up, and it has all those properties.
I've read that honey is one of the only foods, pretty much the only food that doesn't go bad ever. It just, if you don't seal it up and it gets moisture in it, then it can go bad, but because of the different enzymes and antibacterial stuff, bacteria won't grow on it and it won't go bad.
Pretty amazing.
That is really cool. So I have to ask, do you have lots of plants around your house? Do you have lots of, what are some good things that you keep around your home to make sure that they have enough nectar? It's been hot, it's been dry, but what are some good plants that are out there that are good for them?
Well, in this area, I put a lot of clover out. And clover starts in the spring and it runs up till like middle of July when it gets really hot. And that's really when that nectar flow is. It's like April. And they say the tulip poplars, when they start blooming, is kind of a trigger. And there's other stuff you can plant, buckwheat, you can plant rapeseed, just a host of different pollination type of plants. And I try to spread it out as best possible where there's something available in the area throughout the times that they will be active.
Gotcha. That's very neat. So you guys really have to plan for the bees. You have to take care of the bees. And as you said, it's an addictive hobby.
It is. And another plug for our local club is we talk about all this stuff. And people like Ben tells his experiences, things that were successful, things that were not such a... I have messed up my fair share of things, I'll be honest, and will continue probably to do that, but I've learned so much, it's ridiculous.
Absolutely.
It really is.
Well, great. Well, I think there's a lot of cool things that go on with this. You guys talked about how beekeeping is big for our world. It promotes agriculture. It's helping agriculture. It's got great medicinal qualities for us that are allergy sufferers, myself included. And so that is something that really does help, and it helps for that. And it's just really neat. So we talked about the Beekeeping Association, the Lincoln County Beekeepers Association, and the meetings. Let's reiterate that to folks at home and how they can get involved with that, especially because I think there may be some folks at home that think this is really cool. This is something I wouldn't mind trying and doing myself and getting involved. And this is a great way for them to learn more and be educated.
It is. We have, and like I say, we just started up in June. David Qualls, our county agent, has been extremely proactive in this, and I take my hat off to David. He's really the reason this has started. And I wouldn't say I was elected by popular vote. It was more of somebody who would kind of take it on and start it up. So I'm happy to do that. We're going to start our dues and such in January. We're still in the formation part of it to see how many people will come. And I'm getting emails and text messages constantly with new people who are interested in coming. So there's a lot of stuff on the internet about beekeeping, YouTube videos. Some of it's good, some of it's not so good. But we have some very experienced folks in our association and other counties around us, like Giles and Franklin County. There are some, and I'm putting myself in that category as an older timer comer, the old timers that have been doing this, and they can share so much of their knowledge and experience. If you have an issue as a beekeeper, I guarantee you somebody else has had it, and they can help you with it. And we have some folks that come to the club or the association, and they're not beekeepers yet. No, they're not. They want to be apiarists, and they're excited about next year starting beehives. So the more bees that we have out there, the better for agriculture. And like I say, quite frankly, it can become addicting as a hobby, very therapeutic.
Well, and something that we talked about too, you know, we talked about the honey, but we didn't talk about the honeycombs and how that's important too. And there's a lot of different benefits and things, uses for the honeycombs as well. You kind of alluded to the candles, Ben.
Yes.
But what else can you do with the combs and things?
There are lots of different, beeswax is used in lots of different makeup products as well, also in like deodorant stuff, just different things that we use on our bodies. I've heard it's used in shampoo, and it's also
I think some soaps.
Yeah, soaps, and it can be used as a sealant on different things because it's wax. So
it's really cool.
Yeah, it has a variety of different things.
Absolutely. And another thing that we would tell folks is where can they buy local honey here locally? So if they do have allergies and they are an allergy sufferer, they want to get a hold of that.
The farmers market here in Fayetteville, there's folks that sell local honey. Franklin County Farmers Market, I go there, and I'm also a member of the Elk Valley Beekeepers out of Winchester. That's where I first started. You can contact the Ag Center of the club. We can definitely put you in contact with someone who will sell you authentic, organic, raw, local, in my case, mulberry honey that is very good for the allergies and things like that.
Absolutely. And same with you, Ben. They can get in touch with you and your dad through
definitely. We sell honey, and we know some other people who also sell honey. So
absolutely. So that's great. Well, we appreciate both of you coming in today and taking time out of your busy schedules to talk to us a little bit about beekeeping and give us some information about why bees are so important to us and how that benefits our agriculture here in Lincoln County. We've had Ben Fisk and Mr. Ron White with us today, and we've been talking about bees and the Lincoln County Beekeeping Association. And we appreciate you both coming in. And we thank you, our viewers, for watching FPU's Channel 6, and we'll see you back in here next time.